Good afternoon. Today is Friday, January 22nd, 2021, and I am recording my first episode of my podcast, Sensational She-Geek, live at Yancy Street. I'd like to start by talking about the comics that came out this past week, and for DC that would have been January 19th. The Tuesday and Wednesday comics for everybody else would have come out on January 20th. Now, DC is still doing their Future State event, which I'm not even sure if event is quite the right word for it. Future State is supposedly spinning out of death metal the multiple possible futures of the DC universe. Now, possible futures is where it gets kind of tricky here, as I'm not sure, and I think the general consensus for most readers at this point is we're not really sure how much of this we should be really taking seriously into account and how much we should be taking in as a one-time occurrence. For example, let's say the Superman of Metropolis book, written by Sean Lewis, is about John Kent's Superman. And that is because his father Kal-El has been gone off into space and he is on Mongol's war world doing things there, but for the time being, John Kent is the Superman of Earth, and I believe it takes place sometime before the Justice League series, but in that Justice League series for Future State, John Kent is still Superman. He seems to have a little bit better of a reputation at that point than he does currently in his own Superman of Metropolis book, but it seems that that's kind of the direction things are going. Now, currently in the canon DC world, John, he was sent off into the future with the Legion of Superheroes, and they aged him up, I guess. He used to be the same age as Damian Wayne. They had the Super Sons series. Great stuff. They were good friends. And now he's several years older than Damian, so it's a little bit odd why they kind of did that. It's frustrating for a lot of fans. But where I was going with that is, are we going to see John become Superman, the main Superman of Earth, in the coming future after Future State, if that is where he is in Future State, and his father supposedly disappeared sometime after announcing his true name was Clark Kent, secret identity, the way that Brian Michael Bendis did at the start of his run on Superman and Action Comics. And I don't know if we're going to see that kind of come to fruition after Future State. We're kind of all at this midpoint of, really, for the most part, I think people are enjoying what's being written for Future State, and we kind of wish that we would see more of it afterwards. At least I know for myself, for a good deal of the books, I do wish to see more of them afterwards. Yara Flor, for example, I think we are going to see more of her afterwards, possibly as Wonder Girl, at least on a CW TV show, if not in another Joelle Jones written and drawn comic series. Fingers crossed for that. And that kind of spins me into the theory that Future State might actually be, and we have good reason to believe it, was the original, quote, 5G. You all know, I'm sure, the the legendary conspiracy that was 5G was going to be DC completely restarting things again the way they did in New 52, and to a lesser extent, I guess, in Rebirth. However, after the rumors of that started flying, it seemed to have gotten scrapped. But Joelle Jones herself said on a podcast, I believe in October, she came out and confirmed that she was asked to start working on Yara Flor as a character for this 5G reboot that they had supposedly planned. Now, if that is the case for her, I can imagine it possibly was the case for other comic creators as well, who are asked to do things that has now turned into Future State instead of a full reboot. With that in mind, I kind of feel like DC has sort of dropped the ball a little bit on what could have actually been their first major positive and semi-permanent, at least, change in a long time, the first one in a while. They've obviously done lots of changes that people say were too safe, too risky, but with the reaction we're seeing from Future State, it seems that maybe DC made the wrong choice in foreshortening the event or the changes to be just this 2 months, February and January. Of the Future State books that came out on this third week of Future State happening, the books that I read were Immortal Wonder Woman #1, Catwoman #1, The Next Batman #2, and Superman Worlds of War #1. Interestingly, my preferences for those issues didn't go quite the direction that I expected. I knew going into it Catwoman was kind of a throwaway one for me. I wanted it for the Art Germ variant. I have a collection of his Catwoman variants from the Catwoman 2018 series that he did, gosh, probably the first 12 or so issues of. I have most of them. I have all of the ones that I like of it for sure. And here he is doing a Future State Catwoman cover. So that is really exciting for me because that is a kind of different design, different look for Selina than we've seen in previous Art Germ Catwoman pictures. And so I would like to add that to my collection. I don't really have too much of an interest of what's actually going on in Catwoman. That being said, I did read the issue. It was, it was fine. I have a hard time getting on with this Ram V stuff that he does for Catwoman. I think it's kind of up and down for the character, whether it matches her personality or not. This issue was interesting to me because the way it ended. Now we know from the Dark Detective by Mariko Tamaki that came out last week that Bruce Wayne is in a bad situation. He's in a bad way. He was, I believe it was, he was shot in an alley, left for dead. Much of the world, it seems to think that he is dead, and which is repeated in a couple of stories this week. But Catwoman, it seems one of her goals in this issue was to track down something in this moving car, someone who was taken, and it ends up being Bruce. And it's also Talia al Ghul, Bruce's, baby mama for Damian. She is also there, and it's unclear at this point if she and Catwoman are working together to get Bruce, or if they both just happen to be having the same kind of plan. But either way, it was a good enough issue, I guess. I'm not super into the plot. I'll probably get the second one just because I'm curious how this Bruce Wayne timeline is going to play out, how he ends up remaining Batman eventually through all of this supposed death stuff. Now, moving on to the more surprising part of this week's Future State issues was Immortal Wonder Woman #1. Now, this was by Becky Cloonan, Michael Conrad, and art by Jen Bartel for the main Diana section of the interiors. And then there was also a story of Nubia as Wonder Woman. Now, I kind of was expecting this to go a different way. We all know Jen Bartel is incapable of doing unattractive art. She is probably one of the most phenomenal cover artists of the modern era, definitely one of my personal favorites, because she doesn't seem to be able to draw anything that is not absolutely stunning. And that is something that we 100% saw in Immortal Wonder Woman #1. The interiors were head to toe completely perfect, beautifully colored, beautifully lined, beautifully rendered, beautiful faces, beautiful expressions, beautiful deaths, the whole 9 yards. Jen Bartel at her best. If I was to have one minor critique with the art, I would say that I kind of was expecting Wonder Woman to not quite be as smooth-faced. But then again, all the other Amazons were the same that we witnessed in the issue, so I guess I can't really be too picky about it. However, the story by Becky Cloonan and Michael Conrad was lacking. I think it mostly had to do with the fact the art was so beautiful. I don't know if they played it safe, or if they were thinking that possibly the art would carry it enough, or maybe they were just rushed for time. But the story was pretty boring for what you kind of would expect to match up with such stunning artwork. The Nubia story was very fun. I told a lot about Nubia as... I'm sorry, my cat's running around in the background scratching things. It told the story of Nubia as the only Amazon left on Earth and the current Wonder Woman in that modern era. She talks about the Wonder Women, the other Amazons, having left Earth. And it brought up a lot of questions of how does she get to this spot. Nubia has not been a very important character from DC's standpoint in the recent years, especially in the own Wonder Woman Amazon type stuff. So I'm really interested to see how, again, it's one of those things that I'm hoping we get to see more of after Future State is, does Nubia actually spend some time as Wonder Woman in the DC canon, or is this really just going to be for this one shot for Future State? Either way, I'm really interested to see more Nubia, hopefully in the next issue, and hopefully after that, in the regular DC canon. There are just 2 more DC Future State titles which came out this week that I read and would like to talk about. One was The Next Batman #2. This was one that had 3 stories inside of it. The first was, of course, the actual Tim Fox Batman story by John Ridley. Art this week was actually by Laura Braga. Last week it was Nick Darrington. Laura Braga did an excellent job as well. The story itself was good. I feel like I'm still kind of waiting to see how the rest of it goes. Although the one thing I can definitely say is John Ridley does an excellent job writing a Batman of a different point of view and perspective than the Bruce Wayne Batman we're so used to seeing. The second story was called Batgirls. It was written by Vita Ayala and drawn by Annette, with Trish Mulvihill on art. That one was probably my favorite of the 3 stories on the interior because it was so full of references and background things, literally background references. They were at the Magistrate Detention Facility, and it was the 2 Batgirls, Cassandra Cain and Stephanie Brown, who were rooming together, and so you see all the other people who are at the detention facility are other characters, villains, and heroes of the DC universe. There's actually some pretty funny stuff with Jimmy Olsen, who is one of the people at the detention facility, believe it or not. There's some very funny jokes about and around him and from him. And it was just all around an enjoyable story that is going to have a second part to it in the 4th, The Next Batman Future State title, where we will see what is actually going on in this facility. There are not, spoiler alert, there are not just 2 Batgirls being held here. To the best of their knowledge, there are only 2, but there is a 3rd Batgirl. Barbara Gordon is being held at the bottom of the facility and seems to be not remotely, but actually neurologically strapped into the facility. We're not really sure if she's working for them or trying to break free by sending the messages that she's sending, but I'm very interested to see how that goes. And the 3rd issue of the story of The Next Batman #2, the 3rd story of The Next Batman #2, was a fun story about the Gotham City Sirens. Of course, this is minus Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn, as we know from her series in week 1 of Future State, is actually working with the Magistrate to capture the dangerous villains that they themselves are unable to capture. So, minus Harley Quinn, we have the Sirens, Catwoman, and Poison Ivy, who had some really fun outfits that were drawn and designed for them. And then, of course, they have a 3rd member who they join up with in this issue, a robot called Siren. So that was a really fun story as well. Not really anything important, kind of a throwaway, but definitely an enjoyable one if you enjoy those characters and their dynamic. And, of course, the final Future State book of the week was my favorite one, surprisingly, because I don't like this character very much. It's Future State Superman, Worlds of War, #1, by Philip Kennedy Johnson and Mikael Janin, with Jordi Belair on colors. And that was actually one of 4 stories inside the Worlds of War issue #1. This one was the only one I really liked a whole lot. There was one about a female black racer, which I'm very intrigued to see how it goes from here, but it was very short, so I couldn't really make a determination based on the couple of pages that we were thrown. But this main story for Superman Worlds of War was phenomenal. It brings up the fact that I am not the only one who does not like John Kent as Superman. I'm sorry, but that Superman of Metropolis #1 was tragic. What was he thinking? That is a terrible idea, shrinking the city of Metropolis like Kandor. We know that's a bad idea based on Kandor. What made you think that was an okay idea? That was one that came out last week. This week, that's referenced a fair amount in Superman Worlds of War #1, as we see various people throughout Smallville kind of referencing it as definitely as a tragedy, but also as possibly a sign that the Kryptonians are not all as good as Clark Kent. And with Clark Kent being gone, as he is in this issue, the time may be soon coming where Kryptonians like John will start taking advantage of their power more and more. This issue, as I said, takes place with Superman missing, the classics Kal-El Superman, that is, as nobody seems to really accept John Kent, myself somewhat included. So this story is really great because it shows that you don't actually need Superman to be present to have a Superman story. And I don't mean you can just have Clark Kent or somebody. No, I mean you really don't need to have him in the story physically there at the moment to have a good Superman story. Because everything that he does, he leaves stories where he goes. And so in this issue, what we get after a lot of the, what I think was very, very starkly real world reactions of the people of Smallville cashing in on the Clark Kent is Superman kind of money grab, we see a group of survivors of things that would have otherwise killed them who were saved by Superman. So what we get is a circle of characters, and it goes around, and each of them tell their story of how he saved them. And each of them have something that stuck with them beyond just it was Superman. It was always something that was relevant. The terror opening in the universe, the calmness of his voice, the blur of the color as you don't even see him go by, the fact that he saved her entire family as well as this small village without anybody even necessarily noticing it happened, you know? The hugeness of Superman's even small deeds. And then they go on to also discuss what they think happened to him and why he's no longer here with us that they can see. I know a few of them have a more morbid idea, which is, of course, he just didn't come back from a trip this time, didn't come back from a fight. Very believable. Another guy had the idea that if he's dead, it's now, like I said, it's now the hour of the Kryptonians. They're going to start coming. John's just the first one to start abusing humanity, and the other Kryptonians, they are coming. They are a race of space travelers, and there's certainly others out there, and they will be coming now that Clark is not here to protect us. And of course you had to have the classic hippie character talking about how he believes Clark Kent has evaporated into the air and is all around us performing miracles still. And of course, as the issue ends, we get a girl who of course explains the true meaning of Superman: hope, truth, justice, the American way, all of those true, deep, cornerstone elements of the Superman character. And as the issue ends, we see where he is. He is on War World, which, if you think about what that might be, think an ancient Roman Colosseum, oversized and packed full of all manner of angry alien monsters. Superman is in a crate with other prisoners, trapped being pulled to the center of the ring for a new fight, and he's trying to comfort the others who are there with him, but it really doesn't look like things are, like the odds are too in their favor. So that's how the issue ends, with Superman having to fight his way and everyone else's way out of this horrible situation. That was definitely my favorite pick of the week for Future State, and I'm excited to see Philip Kennedy Johnson do more with Superman, hopefully after Future State, when he is writing the series alongside Sean Lewis. Other releases that came out that were not DC this past week. Let's see, we had Abbott 1973 #1. That is a Saladin Ahmed comic, which is actually a second part of a story. Abbott 1973 is part 2, and Abbott was just the first series. ABBOTT is what I'm saying, Abbott, if you can't quite understand that. This #1 of the second series, I read, and it does explain very briefly and very concisely what you need to know from the first series, so I definitely recommend if you are into supernatural detective journalist type things, I would 100% recommend this to you. Another #1 from Indies that started this week was I Breathed a Body. That is a series that is written by Zach Thompson of Lonely Receiver. Lonely Receiver just ended a week ago. It ended in a very, I believe, in my opinion, satisfying way after a trippy, somewhat horrific story that played out. I Breathe the Body is going to be somewhat similar. I imagine it will be a mini-series as well. But in this time, instead of tackling social media and relationships, he is tackling social media and influencers, the whole Silicon Valley lifestyle, I guess you would want to say. This first issue set up a very interesting world, a very unique world. And there's a lot of mystery. There's a lot of mystery that they still have to explain. It seems to be very much a world of dualities, of tragedy and of things kind of not being the way they should be, as well as of high tech. So it's kind of interesting. We'll see where that goes. Other books we had, one of my favorite picks of the week was Black Cat #2. Jed MacKay just does an excellent job with Felicia Hardy. It was a phenomenal issue. I'm glad to see him and CF Villa back on art in a new Black Cat series. The first one should never have ended, and seeing how good these first 2 issues are, it makes me sad for the issues that we could have gotten from that other series leading into this. But we have at least 5 issues of Black Cat to look forward to. This issue #2 is, of course, a King in Black tie-in, but it went far and above my expectations for any kind of King in Black comic. Felicia was wearing 3 different costumes that are unique, well-designed, and new to this series. One of which is a fun Asgardian something or other that we're not sure about yet. I want to say it's Valkyrie-looking thing mixed with Sif's outfit. I don't know. It's some magical Asgardian look that she's got that probably won't be too much of the next issue, but whatever it will be, it'll be a joy to look at. They write her characters, Jed MacKay writes her character very well. There was one page that really defines her character for me, and the fact that it was there was perfect. Basically just stating how outrageous Felicia's existence is from start to finish, and that's what's expected for me from her, and that's what we're definitely getting. So this has been a very satisfying series. Cable #7 by Gary Duggan with Phil Noto on art was, of course, a predictably excellent issue. Pretty much anything Phil Noto does the interiors of, I will adore. His art is absolutely stunning. With him back on Cable after post X of Swords, we're going to be seeing more of young Cable running around trying to get the stolen mutant babies back. He's kind of had it up and down, his series being about different things. Now it seems we're kind of getting back to that. It was a very fun issue. I am very happy that this is still an ongoing series. Another DC book that came out was Dead Planet #7, the supposed finale of the DC saga. While I enjoyed the issue, more or less, I didn't like the ending. It ended with an embrace between Oliver Queen and Dinah Lance, who, of course, they're married and all that, but I didn't know the series was about the 2 of them. But apparently it was. And also, of course, there's no way this could actually be the ending unless Tom Taylor just gave up, because we still have Superman, zombie Superman, in the sun, sucking up the sun rays, planning on coming back down to Earth and spreading his disease. None of that was ever really spoken about since the last time they mentioned it was still a problem. So kind of wondering what happened there. Another issue that came out was X-Force #16. This was actually a really fun issue. It's bringing up some problems that Krakoa is going to start having, which we knew that was going to happen. We had what were they, octogenarians? The old ladies who came through and were terrorizing them, the old smart ladies. Well, now we have underwater goop. It was a fun issue. It was very well drawn, of course, as X-Force always is. And Benjamin Percy, of course, does an excellent job with the humor/horror genre. And then going through, I think the last thing I have to talk about here is Batman Catwoman #2. Absolutely predictably, there we go. This was a completely perfect issue. The best thing that I can describe the style of storytelling that Clayman and Tom King have put together here is cinematic. There is no text telling you when the scene jumps from era to era. There is nothing like that. There's nothing to ease you through transitions. It's all based on how much you're paying attention to the subtleties of the art and the story to get you from point A to point B and understand how that happened. It's 3 main storylines that are playing out. You get the beginning of Bruce and Selina's affair when he's Batman and she's Catwoman, and they have only just started, let's just say it, sleeping with each other. The second timeline that we see is Bruce and Selina as life partners as well as work partners, if you want to go with it that way. And it is Andrea Beaumont's return to Gotham because her son has, as we learn in the first issue, been killed by the Joker, or through Joker-esque means. So now we have Andrea going after the Joker's henchmen, leading up to getting him. The third and final era of the story is after Bruce's death, where an old Selina drives to Florida to kill a long-retired Joker. The first issue was full of pleasant chat and pleasantries until Selina finally comes up and admits she's here to kill him. This second issue has some more chatting, pleasant things, and we see the Joker try and defend himself and fail, predictably, and Selina is far smarter and more determined than he probably ever has been. So, what ends up happening is, of course, she does get to kill him, but we do also get to hear her talk about how she's doing this for revenge for Andrea Beaumont. Andrea was an ex of Bruce's, yes, but Andrea was also the Phantasm. While the Joker was the cause of her son's death, the way that Selina talks about, quote, "She can't ever get Andrea out of my head. I keep seeing her." And she tells the Joker how she used to beg Bruce on hands and knees to let her kill him for what he did to her. That sounds to me like something a little bit more intense than just losing a child. There must be something else going on here. My theory, if you really want to know, is that it has something to do with the combination of his surrendering to them at the final end of the, let's call it the modern era of the story, with Bruce and Selina as partners. And it also probably has something to do with the family he apparently had as an old man. Selina, when she arrived to Florida to the Joker's house in the first issue, spoke to him about his children and grandchildren. Now, I can't imagine Joker actually having children and grandchildren, so something here makes me think that there's something very sick and twisted about his family that has to do with something he did to, or does in the future, in that sense, to Andrea Beaumont. The next week of comics that's coming out is going to be January, I believe that is the 26th and 27th, 2021. That is going to be the 4th week of Future State, and I have a good amount of comics that I'm going to be reading. It's a long release week, so I'll be writing a blog post and posting about that by the end of the weekend. That will be posted by this coming Sunday, the 24th, to prepare you for the coming releases on the 26th and the 27th. Some of the highlights to go through here. We have the 2nd issue of Mariko Tamaki's Dark Detective. She is a writer who I follow because I first found her for the She-Hulk series in 2016 and fell in love with her writing and her characterizations at that point. We also have the first Future State Aquaman title, which will have Jackson Hyde as well as Andy Curry starring. Andy Curry being, I believe her name was Andrea or something ridiculous like that, the daughter of Arthur and Mera, the rulers now of Atlantis. Jackson Hyde being the Black Aquaman, who I think he first came from the Young Justice show. I don't know, don't quote me on that, I could be completely wrong. But it's going to be interesting seeing him mentor her as a young child, and then later on she'll become Aquawoman, and he will become, I believe, the ruler of Atlantis. We'll see. I don't actually know for sure. We have another issue of Other History of the DC Universe coming from John Ridley. The first issue was absolutely stunning, telling stories from the point of view of Black superheroes, and this next one will be following the original Teen Titans as told by Karen Beecher Duncan, better known as Bumblebee, and Mal Duncan. This is not an area that I'm completely familiar with, but they were two of the first black superheroes to ever appear in comics. So it'll be interesting seeing that time period told from their perspective. We also have Monstrous coming out with issue 31. It's been 2 or so months since they were on their break after issue 30. They did have a few little they called them Monstrous Talk Stories, was the 2 short little issues they had that were very sweet stories, a little bit heartbreaking at the same time, about various characters in the monstrous world. With this new arc, we're going to be having, it's Sana Takeda and writer Marjorie Liu are back. Of course, this is their baby. And I can't say enough just how much I think everybody should read this comic. This is up there with Saga, Sex Criminals, books like that, which I would recommend to anybody who's interested in comics that aren't necessarily strictly cape comics. They aren't just the superheroes, they aren't just, the Marvel DC cliches we all know. Monstrous takes place in a world it's a matriarchal Asian-inspired world. Most characters are female. There's actually very few male characters, and it's all done in a way that is, in my opinion, completely natural. I've spoken to other people who've read the series, and it is, for a lot of people, you have to kind of have it be pointed out to you that there's not any men in this series. It's written so naturally that they make it work better than in most other comics, period. Other comics coming out this week. We have Batman White Knight Presents Harley Quinn #4. My current theory of that, spoilers for #3 if you haven't read it, is that the police forensic specialist is actually a serial killer. The serial killer, I guess I should say. I believe he is cross-dressing as her, and we're going to find that out at some point, probably in issue 5. We also have the final issue 5, of An Unkindness of Ravens. It's kind of sad to find out that this was actually the last issue, because I felt like issue 4 was where we really started getting the ball rolling. So it's kind of unfortunate. We're just getting pumped up for everything as it ends. It's a fun series for fans of Sabrina the Teenage Witch and Archie comics. Follows a teenage girl in a creepy witch-based town. Department of Truth #5 is another indie comic. It's coming from Image. This is by James Tynion, I believe is how you say his last name. He is not, I can't really say that I'm a fan of his writing. He is currently working on the main Batman series, and I think it's god-awful. I'm sorry if you like it, but I don't think I've read things that I've disliked that much in a long time. Without going into reasons for that, his indie stuff is the exact opposite, for the most part. Department of Truth, I thoroughly enjoy. I think it's a very fun and exciting book. The art style is unique and fitting, and the story is intriguing, and as intriguing as anything about conspiracy theories could be. It's just fun, you're going into the conspiracy theories, big and small. So I'm kind of looking forward to where we're gonna go next. Then we have Strange Adventures #8. This is 8 of 12, and this is by, of course, Tom King, Mitch Gerads, and Doc Shaner. I have written to the moon and back about how phenomenal this series is. It is a Tom King series, so if you have trouble with a little bit of the Tom King series, maybe just wait until the collected edition comes out, or collect all 12 issues and read them at once. Some people have a little bit of easier time with that, but as I've said over and over and over again, the art of this series is impeccable. You have dueling stories and dueling art styles. So I'm really interested to see how they kind of match up at the end, what the actual truth is. Another Deadpool issue is a King in Black tie-in. Honestly, not too excited about it. It's Kelly Thompson, who I enjoy, and Deadpool, who of course I enjoy. King in Black, it's kind of meh. New Mutants #15, I am very excited for. Vita Ayala and Rod Reese, I spoke a lot about how I am excited for their run of New Mutants before issue 14, and issue 14 was even better than I had hoped for, so they are undoubtedly killing it, and I am so excited to see where they take this team, and what the dynamic of the team is going to change to be with, it looks like, new team members. Other Dawn of X books we have, Reign of X books. Ooh, we're into Reign of X now. The other books for that we have coming out is Wolverine number 9, Excalibur 17, and X-Men number 17. It looks like Excalibur, there's going to be Excalibur stuff. Teeny Howard writes it. X-Men, though, it looks like it's going to be Storm, Cyclops, and Marvel Girl teaming up for the wet dream of all classic X-Men fans. That's no doubt going to be excellent. Jonathan Hickman does so well with these characters, as he always does. And I am excited to see what he puts them into this week. And moving along then, we have Captain Marvel number 25. We have one more issue to go in this story arc of Carol having been sent to the apparent future. There's yet to be really any answers about what exactly got her there and what exactly it is that she's in right now. We don't know if it's the future or a parallel world, or if, everything's going to change as soon as she goes back. What we do know, based on the solicitations of issue 27, is that when she does get home, spoilers possibly, it's in the solicitation, so I don't know if it's a spoiler, she does break up with Rhodey. This was something I did not see coming. We know that in this current storyline, Carol is working alongside Rhodey's future daughter, who is not her daughter. My theory on that is that she's Kitty Pryde's daughter, Kate Pryde's daughter, because of her power set, but we have yet to have that confirmed as well. But it does seem that this trip to the future will cause Carol to return home and break up with Rhodey. Whether it's going to play out that way, we'll have to wait and see. But what's very exciting for me is we have just received the solicitation for issue 28 earlier this week, as well as the cover image. The solicitation mentions that Carol fails to stop Ove, but more excitingly, she decides to do something for it and make a move into learning magic. Magic being one of the biggest failures of most superheroes to learn, and one of their constant biggest weaknesses. What is the big thing about Superman? He's pretty much impervious to anything, but he can't do shit against magic. So, it seems that they're doing a similar thing with Carol here, where they want her to be able to have that no longer be a thing. And as for the cover image, we saw that she has a new suit coming for this new series starting in issue 28, it would appear. It's a little bit of a darker suit, kind of, I guess you would say, similar to the Spider-Woman redesign, which, once again, she's going back to her suit in a few issues, unfortunately. But this new Carol suit for Captain Marvel, it has a hood, it's got the Hala star off to one side, and it's black and red. So it's a little bit of a magical kind of take to her standard suit, with definitely some inspiration from the Dark Carol run of Captain Marvel, where she was supposedly killing her fellow Avengers, but that's not actually what was happening. You gotta read it to understand it. But it's a lot similar to that suit as well, and I wonder if that's going to be mentioned in the series, or if it just kind of ended up being that way and they're just going to ignore it. Either way, I'm very excited for a new arc, a new suit, and a new potential power set for Captain Marvel. Which brings us into the last book I'm going to talk about for next week, Daredevil number 26. It is a King Black tie-in, but more interestingly, it's the first issue after we find out that Elektra is the new Daredevil. That is obviously something that I am super pumped about. I can't really explain to you how excited I am for that. I understand also that it's most likely going to be extremely temporary, but I don't care. I'm really here for it. I think that Chip Zdarsky does he does a phenomenal job writing Elektra, which is true, but that's just really not saying enough. He does a phenomenal job writing all the characters he writes. I remember us binging the series when I first got into it, and I think it was early 2020. I remember coming across the scenes of Daredevil and Spider-Man interacting, and the way that he writes their interactions not only captures their very, very long and historied friendship, but the reactions a man like Matt Murdock would have to a man like Peter Parker, the physicality of him, the way that he senses that kind of power in a person was shocking and stunning, honestly, to read. And then, of course, it happens again when Detective Cole North meets Spider-Man for the first time, and he has a similar reaction to just seeing that sort of stuff happen. And now we have Elektra, who has become kind of a main character, of course. Daredevil's in prison. I don't know how long that's going to last, but Elektra is now Daredevil. I'm curious to see the reaction of Hell's Kitchen and the rest of New York. I'm curious to see the reaction of other heroes and villains. She's kind of an anti-hero, to say the least, so some people may not be okay with her trying to call herself a hero, but the whole point of her doing this is to try and prove to Matt Murdock that she can be a hero, she can be good, she can do what he does. We'll see how well it actually works out, but that is her goal, is to prove that to him while he's in prison. And I'm just, Marco Caccetta's art, oof, he got me. And that wraps up my pull list. That's pretty much everything that I had planned to talk about for the comics that are coming out. Meanwhile, in pop culture, I know we have WandaVision is premiering on Fridays, and I have not yet watched today's episode. I will watch that when I'm finished with this. Other news we have going on is, let's see, Scream is back. If you are a fan of the character Scream from Marvel Comics, she was back in Planet of the Symbiotes #1, and she will be back in a one-shot for King in Black, just King in Black Scream. It's easy to remember title. I wish it was longer, but I am glad to have her back in any way. If, of course, you didn't hear about it, in March, Peach Momoko is coming out with Demon Days, which is a manga sort of style, Japanese style version of the Marvel universe. She's going to be taking some of the X-Men characters, such as Psylocke, and I believe Jubilee, and then also Venom. He's not an X-Men, but Venom, too. And they will be appearing in this Japanese version of stories that she will be telling, as well as drawing. I am a pretty big fan of her art. I am very excited to see what kind of ideas she has as far as stories. We know that after Future State, there's going to be some new creative teams on books. Brian Michael Bendis is leaving Superman and going to Justice League. This announcement was a bit of a fake out, if I have to be honest, by DC. They released an image of the Justice League team members, many of which were easily recognizable, such as Naomi. We obviously all know Naomi has a unique look. She is one of the new characters on the team. We have Green Arrow and Black Canary, pretty easy to catch their costumes. However, they faked us out because they had shaded the faces and the bodies of certain characters. Key characters. There was an Amazon, and there was a Batman. As we may all know, in the next Batman right now, Tim Fox's Batman character has completely blacked out suit. You can't see his face, you can't see anything. We also know that Nubia has returned as a character in Immortal Wonder Woman. DC releasing that poster with those two specific characters blacked out so you can't see who they were was 100% them letting people assume that that was Nubia and that was Tim Fox Batman. Imagine my disappointment the next couple of days when they released the colorized photo without the shadows. It is actually just Hippolyta and Bruce Wayne. My disappointment is paramount, but I'll probably still read issue 1. One other thing I would like to touch on is Jen Bartel is doing 8 covers for the Women's History Month. She is, of course, as I mentioned earlier on this cast, she is one of my favorite artists she mostly does covers, favorite modern cover artists. She'll be doing 8 of these covers across Marvel's titles. And I'm really excited to get all of those, whether or not I am getting the series or not. I'm not sure what all the characters are going to be yet. I know that she is doing a Iron Man one, and it's going to have Patsy Walker, and she's doing an Avengers one that's going to have She-Hulk. I know that she's also doing a Ghost Rider, as well as a few others that I don't normally read, and I'm not actually sure what characters they would put in there. I know there was a female Ghost Rider character, but I'm not sure if she's going for that kind of deep cut character for this to spotlight. But either way, none of those pictures have been announced yet as to what they'll look like, but I am very excited, and my current theory is that they're going to have corner boxes. I don't have much to back that theory up, except for a teaser image she had of a tiny little She-Hulk whose face was very spotty. And my theory there is that it's a tiny little, old-fashioned comic-style polka dot She-Hulk corner box. I'm probably wrong, but I would love that. So that's my theory. I think that's everything that I had to say this week. My socials are, I am Savage She-Geek on Twitter because Sensational was too long. My website is sensationalshegeek.weebly.com because I don't put money into this shit. My Instagram is Anna with the Comics because that's just what it's been for a while now. Oh yeah, my YouTube. My YouTube is also Sensational She-Geek. You can look me up by that as well. I am happy if anybody listened to this far. I'm pleased to have you here. And if you like what you heard, or you have any questions, or have any suggestions for what I should talk about next time, give me an email, give me a shout out, reply, comment, send me a paper airplane. Let me know. I like to hear from people so I know I'm not yelling into the void. And even if I am, have a good night.